go. Okay, so my name is Madkins-Choyce, and I am a first grade teacher at Mount Vernon. And I want to talk to you a little bit about mile deep writing and technology integration. So let's go a little bit over our norms and expectations. We're going to celebrate successes, stay on topic, fail forward, validate each other's feelings and concerns, and be respectful of our neighbors and the presenter. So let's talk a little bit about the role of technology, okay? So what I've done in the past, and I know other teachers have as well, is look at technology as the goal. And it's really not, it's the accelerator. Technology is what makes your lesson better. It does not create your lesson. And let's talk a little bit about technology and some of the problems we have. Some people have structural issues. Internet doesn't work, not enough Chromebooks. Sometimes there's incompatibilities with some updating. Student issues, they don't know how to use the Chromebooks. They have to be supervised, otherwise you don't know what they're doing. I am not going to talk about that. I'm going to focus strictly on lessons and how to make our lessons strong, because a lot of times they're not fully integrated with technology. They're not really that meaningful. They're not standards-based, and they don't help with the students' learning or with our SBAC testing. So let's talk a little bit about the mile deep concept, okay? That's actually a concept that was coined by Edgar Nye, and that's just another fancy way. There's some other information here that you can kind of go over just to explain the concept. But pretty much he was concerned about something being only 1 inch deep and a mile wide. Well, when we use our technology, we want to make sure that our technology use is making our lesson a mile deep, not just a mile wide. So how do we create a mile deep lesson? Okay, sometimes it can be kind of confusing, a little winding, but let's try to narrow it down. So let's start with first, what you and your PLC are going to be thinking about as you're making your lesson. One of your first thing that you're going to be thinking about is, what do you want your students to learn? That's the first step in a good PLC. One of your four guiding questions. What do you want your students to learn? Well, the first thing you're going to do is look at your test scores and analyze for strengths, analyze for weaknesses. Look at your tools. That's going to help make your lessons deeper and more meaningful and more complex. Create or discover an appropriate rubric. Find our mentor text to kind of guide your students so they know what their lessons, their writing should look like, and decide on appropriate technology tools, okay? So let's look at our data. Let's analyze some of our data. These are our SBAC scores from 2016 to 17. The new ones are not yet up. And this is actually from the California Department of Education. So you get access to this anytime you need to. This is our ELA scores, okay? If you look at our overall scores over here, what you'll see is that between our exceeding standards and meeting our standards, we have a combined total of 27%. That's not necessarily the best, but what I will say is there's a lot of room for improvement. Looking at that same data a different way, in a bar graph, and if you notice, there's a lot of blank spaces here because, of course, Mount Vernon doesn't have 7th or 8th or 11th grade students. But as you can see, overall, same distance, but you can see what our weaknesses are and what our strengths are. Okay, same scores. Let's look at the reading strand of our SBAC testing. Overall, our score is 9.75%. That's our proficiency level, okay? Again, not the greatest. Let's take a look at our writing strand. Again, not the greatest, but a lot of room for improvement. We got 10%. And then for our listening and speaking component, we got 6%. And then for the presenting or researching inquiry, we got 12%. So again, this is a little bit stronger than some of the other scores, but still we have a lot of room for improvement. So now looking at the data, we kind of see we really need to start at a strategic area, but we can go through all the strands and make our lessons more complex and deep. so that we can kind of hit all these areas. So some of our tools that we're going to have. We just had our data. We're going to look at the standards to help us make a meaningful connecting lesson. We're going to use the SAMR model, which is what we're going to use for technology to help integrate our technology, Bloom taxonomy, and Webb's DOK. That is what we're going to use to make our lesson complex and deep and meaningful. And then of course a rubric and an anchor text. Now if you click on this right here, it's already linked for you. Let me show you what it's going to look like. It is actually kind of linked to our district's webpage that has all curriculum instruction webpage, which has all the different tools that you can use, okay? If you look here, you'll see our English and language arts standards, math standards, some technology components. This is Illuminates, where you can get a lot of our test scores. And there's some other things here, but a lot of really good tools to help you make a meaningful lesson. Okay, so just click on that link if you do not know where to start. So I'm going to go back to my lesson. So this is where we start with our tools, okay? I picked the standard, let me go back, I'm sorry. I picked the standard for 4th grade, okay? And the one that I picked, just looking at it, is explain major difference. It's RL 5, explain major differences between poems, drama, and prose, and the structural elements. Now I'm going through each strand because as you remember from our data, each strand needed some work, okay? So I'm gonna go through each strand, and this is the reading. And then you have for the writing, and I noticed when I was looking at the standards, I could actually hit more than one standard at once, which is gonna make our lesson more deep, more meaningful. Again, mile deep, not an inch deep. So what I found is on the SBAC, the writing is going to be a big component. So I picked the writing, the narrative component, okay? But then again, if I look over here, another part of the writing standard, I can use some technology here. So with some guidance and support from adults, use technology, including the internet. So that is going to be standard 6. So again, we're hitting more than one component at once, which again is going to help our lesson. For the speaking and listening component, we looked at standard 4, or SL4, which is going to be plan and deliver a narrative presentation. That's the one that I picked for my lesson. And then again, another writing standard that we could use is drawing evidence from literary informational text for reflection, because at the end of each lesson, each day in our lesson, the students are going to reflect on their project. So that's how you get that component of your standard in. Now let's talk about our Bloom's taxonomy. Again, this is really where you're going to get your depth and complexity in your lesson. If you click here, you will actually get a link to give you some more details and some more tools to help you with your lesson planning. So as you know, as you go up your triangle in Bloom's, you are actually going to create more depth and complexity. So you're going to start off with remembering, just recall, and end up with organizing, generating, constructing, designing, a lot more depth and complexity at the top. And so actually when I was going through the lesson and creating it, I actually went through each strand to make sure I was hitting everything. But at the end, I did make sure I had the top part of that taxonomy. We don't want an inch deep, okay? We want a little bit deeper than that. Now, I couldn't decide which tool or way, a visual to have you understand a DOK level. But I thought this was kind of cute. So I did, as you can see, they go from top to bottom instead of the opposite way as in Bloom's taxonomy. So this is the recall, skill, strategic thinking, and distinctive thinking. And you really want to pick something for each. In the lesson that I compiled, I made sure I hit each one. Again, you don't want an inch, you want a deep. And this is just another visual, okay? So if you make sure you pull a target skill out of each one, you can make sure you hit all different levels. Now, when I was researching how to combine Bloom's and the Webb DOK, I kind of had a hard time kind of figuring out what to use. So what I did is I created a video here for you to kind of watch. It was very helpful. And when I was planning my lesson, I made sure I kind of went through these little steps, because the author of this video was just saying, they don't really compete with each other. They kind of more go hand in hand. So I did kind of have them side by side as I was planning my lesson. And then here, of course, is another tool. This is your technology component. This is the SAMR model. And really what it does is it allows you a tool to show you how to integrate technology into your lesson, okay? Remember, it is the accelerator, it's not the goal. So there's 4 steps here. You have the substitution, which you're just pretty much substituting a technology component from just a regular paper version. How does tech act as a direct tool substitute? Allowing the tech to significantly modify your lesson or redefine. And again, I want to make sure I hit each one of these in my lesson. So for example, when I did substitution, I gave the students a Google form to create and to fill out. That was my substitution. When I wanted something to be augmented and I wanted the kids to speak, instead of speaking in front of the audience, I had them speak in Screencastify. So I hit that. When I wanted something modified, I wanted something a little bit more redesigned, a little bit different. This is modifying the lesson. I had them use Flipgrid, okay? And then for redefining, they actually used stop animation, and they completely redefined, because in that area, it's something that you cannot use unless you have technology, okay? So I made sure I hit each one. Now, if these are a little bit complicated for you, I completely understand. So there's a link here, and this is what I used when I was designing my lesson. Now, for those of you who are not technologically advanced, I am definitely not. This tool was really helpful because it allowed me to look at the Bloom's taxonomy and figure out which one of these tech tools or apps we're going to be able to hit each one of these different strands of Bloom's, okay? And so there's Flickr here, and the remembering, there's analyzing, but what I will say is that some tools can actually hit more than one. So if you do a Screencastify, you can say, ask the students to do, let's just click over, ask the students to do a remembering activity. But then you can also have them do an analyzing, where they're analyzing on screen. So some tech tools will actually hit more than once. It just depends on how you plan for it. And then I really like this too, because this combined the webs with the SAMR model. So you could actually look at your verbs of your webs design. This is 2 different ways of looking at it. And then you can combine it with the SAMR to make sure you're hitting your substitution, augmentation, and so forth. Now let's go to another tool that you have to have. Now this one I just got off of Teacher Pay Teachers, but if you have your own, go for it. I want the students to understand what their writing should look like, so they have the expectations for themselves right up front. And so I have this rubric. This is linked also to the rubric on Classroom Google, so if you just need some help finding one, you can go ahead and click on this, and it has grades K through 6. And then you want a mentor text. Well, guess what? The district already has this linked, but you know, this is linked too. And the Common Core State Standards have anchor text, so it's ready for you to go. So you can just click on that. So what I did is I created my lesson plan. This is just to go over a little bit of the first day when I actually went through and planned it. I did a lesson on Kitten's First Full Moon, which is a 2nd grade text. It's pretty simple. But remember, I was looking at writing, and pretty much what the lesson is going to do is it's going to ask the students to modify and change this story to add something so to help them with their standard. And I made sure I put my technology tools, I have my standard, I have my content, language, and social objectives, as well as some vocabulary, and exactly what I do on each day. If you click on this, you will see the link to the complete lesson plan. And that's it.